What's up, Star Wars nerds, and welcome back to Battle Station Radio. I'm your host, Kate Ellsworth. Today we're going to be talking about the most recent Bad Batch episode, which is the 4th episode of Season 3, titled A Different Approach. So we'll get into the recap and then a little bit of a review, share some of my thoughts on the episode. So we open with Omega and Crosshair. Obviously, they've just finished escaping from Tantus, and so their shuttle is injured and not working. So the shuttle breaks down and they crash land on this planet called Lao. And they crash, and Crosshair knows that they need to get off this planet because the Empire is definitely going to be looking for them, and they probably have a way to find this ship that's crashed. So Crosshair decides that they need to get to the nearest spaceport, so they go to the nearest spaceport, and then we're interjected with a scene on Tantus. We see Nala Se in her prison cell, and she's being interrogated by Dr. Hemlock, but she is not being very forthcoming with information about Omega. And of course, Hemlock is busy threatening her. And that is one of 2 times we see Hemlock in this episode. So back on Lao, Crosshair and Omega need to have a plan to get off this planet and get away from the Empire. They get some disguises so they don't look like themselves. Although I think they could both get away with just being themselves because it's not like Crosshair is recognizable. If you were a regular clone like Rex, everyone would know, oh, that's a clone. They probably shouldn't be here in plain clothes. But I think the disguises maybe were a little unnecessary. So anyway, Crosshair knows that they have to get to the spaceport, get on a shuttle. And of course, Crosshair is pretty trigger happy. So he wants to just shoot his way out, and they can just commandeer a shuttle and go out that way. But Omega doesn't think that's the greatest idea, so she has another idea. And it's hilarious to see what I assume a 10 to 13-year-old, and she goes straight to bribery. The lady at the desk asks for their chain codes, and so Omega decides bribery is the best option. And she says, for a price, can you get us on this shuttle? The lady says yes, but capitalizes on the moment, and she says it's going to be 15,000 credits each. So together that's 30,000 credits. So now Crosshair and Omega need to come up with 30,000 credits somehow. So they go to a bar, and Omega sees a Trandoshan and another guy playing some cards and gambling. And so she knows that she's pretty good at these games. So she goes to the gamble with the Trandoshan. He doesn't really take her seriously, but she cleans him out and gets some of their much needed credits. Then we have an Imperial captain comes in, and this guy is unlikable from the start. The way he walks, the way he conducts himself. So he goes over to Omega and challenges her to a game of cards and gambling. So Omega wins this game against this Imperial captain. And as he's leaving, one of the stormtroopers comes up to him and tells him that they found a crashed shuttle near the city. And he seems a bit suspicious of that, but doesn't say anything to Omega or Crosshair. But before he leaves, he informs her that gambling is, of course, illegal on Lao, and that she needs to pay a 10,000 credit fine to be able to not be arrested. So already we can see the Empire is a very rules for thee but not for me kind of organization. Obviously this captain is very corrupt. It starts early in the Empire. And of course, I think it's funny how he challenges her to a game, and then immediately after he loses, he's like, actually, I'm going to get half of the money you got from me back with charging you with a crime. Anyway, so they go outside, but Batcher, who they left outside of the bar for obvious reasons, is gone. There's a little scavenger boy, and he sort of fleeces them and makes them pay an additional 5,000 credits to tell them which way Batcher went, and he informs them that the Imperial captain apprehended Batcher and took him somewhere. Now we come to the most important part of the whole episode. Basically, Crosshair is like, okay, let's take our money, because they still have enough to make the fee. They have 35,000 credits still, which, how much money did Omega take from people while gambling? It's crazy. Anyway, so obviously Crosshair is very logical, so he wants to go to the spaceport, pay the bribe, and get out of there. But of course, Omega needs to rescue her dog, Batcher, and she says, Batcher helped us escape from Tantus, and so we got to go back for him. Anyway, Crosshair is not a fan of that, And so Omega gives him the credits, and she says, fine, if you want to leave, leave, but I'm going to go get Badger. And it's funny how she leaves, and you see Crosshair turn around, and then his shoulders go up and down, and he sighs. And he's obviously thinking, well, obviously I need to go get Omega because she made sure to rescue me, and so I need to pay it back. I think this is a really important moment for Crosshair's character and his development throughout the Bad Batch. Seasons 1 and 2, Crosshair wouldn't have hesitated to leave Omega behind just because. And this version of Crosshair, he's been through some stuff. He's seen that the Empire is not all that they claim to be, and they've tortured him and made his life pretty miserable. And I think also he feels sort of a responsibility to keep Omega safe. Obviously, she helped him escape from Tantus. She wasn't going to leave without him. And I think this is sort of his way of repaying that, but also not just for repaying. I think he's genuinely fond of Omega, obviously because he refused to give any information about her to Dr. Hemlock in Season 2. And so I think this is a great moment for Crosshair to show us what he's made of. So Crosshair follows Omega to the other side of town. There's a big industrial area and some ships and then a bunch of cargo containers which contain various creatures. And so they see all these animals, Batcher included. They're sneaking in to rescue Batcher. And who shows up but this Imperial captain? So he's put two and two together. Crosshair and Omega are newcomers to town. Crash shuttle. And so he's been in contact with Dr. Hemlock and informs Omega that Dr. Hemlock is going to come and grab her again. So she chucks the bag of money back to the Imperial captain because obviously he wants to keep all these funds for himself, most likely. And then she says to Crosshair, all right, let's try it your way now. Let's go your plan. And so, of course, he starts a big firefight with his blaster. In the chaos, Omega goes to this console and sets all the animals free. There's a big stampede, which is pretty funny to watch all the stormtroopers get knocked over by all these various flora and fauna. During the chaos of the stampede, Omega and Batcher get into this cargo ship that was about to leave with all these animals, and she steals the cargo ship. The stampede, combined with the exhaust fumes of the cargo ship that Omega has turned on, opens the largest container, and this tentacle comes out, grabs the captain, pulls him back in, shuts the door, and then proceeds to commence with its midnight snack. So that's an unfortunate end to the captain. He gets eaten. So they successfully steal this cargo ship, and they escape, and they go into hyperspace. So the next scene is Hemlock has come, and he's looking at the crash shuttle, and he's looking very, very grumpy that they didn't apprehend Omega again. And so, right, obviously, this whole season, he's going to be trying to get Omega back. Omega transmits her coordinates to Hunter and Wrecker, and they meet her in a remote location. And so she comes out of the ship. There's a big tearful reunion with Wrecker and Hunter. Hunter asks her, how did she escape? And she says that she had help. And so then we have the reunion between brothers at last. The Bad Batch reunited. Crosshair steps out of the cargo ship, and I'd say he's about 20, 30 yards away. The two ships are about 20, 30 yards away. And so they're each at the ramp of their respective ship, and Hunter and Wrecker are kind of staring at Crosshair, looking very grumpy and uncertain. Omega kind of looks up at Hunter and Wrecker like, okay, now that this is happening, what are you going to do? And it's a pretty cool transition between the feeling you have during the reunion with her and Hunter and Wrecker. That's very sweet, and it's playing her theme. And then it goes quiet, and it plays Crosshair's theme as he exits his ship. And so they're in a bit of a standoff, and that's how the episode ends. And, of course, that's a good cliffhanger for the next episode. I'm excited for episode 5. But now that we've finished our little recap of sorts, now we can talk about some of my thoughts I had watching the episode and some questions I had. So my first question is not related to this episode at all. It's related to the premiere. But I had the question of, so Omega obviously has either a high M count or the capacity to have an M count transfer happen. Somehow maybe she's helpful with that. My question is if Omega is a clone of Emery, then why was Emery never tested, right? Why is her blood not important to Project Necromancer? So maybe they'll explain, what are the differences between Omega and Emery. Maybe there's some added genetics, added DNA in Omega's case that Emery doesn't have, but I'll be interested to see them address that. There's a couple small things I wrote down as far as my thoughts on the episode. One is that stormtroopers in trench coats look pretty cool. There's a lot of different stormtrooper variants in this one. Not different, but they're just kind of dressed up. One has a trench coat. One has like a cloak. There's one with goggles. I think it's cool to watch stormtroopers get accessorized. I think it's hilarious that, again, Omega goes straight to bribery and fleecing people via gambling. It's funny to watch a little 12-year-old and she goes straight to just villainy. Not really villainy because she had to do what she had to do, but it's funny that bribery is her first instinct. There's a return of some creatures from the Clone Wars. I don't know if you noticed, but some of the little animals, they have really long legs. They kind of look like have like flamingo legs, and they're part of the stampede that happens when Omega frees all the animals. But if you remember, these animals make an appearance in the Clone Wars episode something the Void. It's where the little tiny mini colonel is with the R2-D2 and the other droids, and they're on their super secret mission. I thought it was cool to see those animals again. And of course, the animal that eats the captain is from the episode where Ahsoka and Anakin and Obi-Wan and Rex, they escape from Zygeria. It's the whole Zygeria Clone Wars arc. And this monster is from the end of that arc where they're trying to catch this rogue Zygerian lieutenant or something. And so they chase him into his ship, and he takes off, and Anakin and Ahsoka do a couple of cool force jumps onto the ship, and then they have to fight this big monster that this Zygerian guy is keeping as a pet. So it's the same. It's like the tentacles are identical, so I'm pretty sure it's just a recycled creature, but it's cool to have little callbacks to the Clone Wars. Obviously, Crosshair gets to try his plan of shooting his way out. I think Omega's plan and Crosshair's plan is sort of a way to look at the difference between a child being naive and thinking, oh, we don't have to hurt anyone to get out of this dangerous situation. We can try other tactics. And then Crosshair is the opposite end of the spectrum of the bitter adult who is like, well, the only way we're going to get out of this is by shooting some people. And so it's interesting that she gets to try his plan and he gets to try his plan. And together, these plans get them out of this situation. Speaking of Crosshair and Omega, I really love their dynamic. I've seen a lot of stuff on social media about how people are really loving their relationship. He definitely is giving vibes of a reluctant parent or uncle that's just kind of following along with what the kid does. And she's very much, bright-eyed and naive and all these things. And so it's interesting to watch and hilarious to watch their personalities counter off one another or bounce off one another. Obviously, the reunion scene between Omega and Wrecker and Hunter is very sweet. There's some tears shed as she embraces Hunter and Wrecker. Obviously, since the cliffhanger of season 2 and the episodes to start off season 3, we've been waiting for this reunion, and it definitely paid off. They played Omega's theme, which is a beautiful piece of music. And of course, it was just a very sweet scene. The big question is, will Crosshair rejoin his brothers in the Bad Batch? Obviously, the answer is yes, because in the trailers, there's some shots of Crosshair in his armor. Also, not sure about where his armor is. How is he going to get his armor back? Wouldn't it be Imperial property now? Anyway, we'll see if he gets some new armor or if they just never explain that. It'll be interesting in episode 5. There's definitely going to be some conflict between him and Wrecker or Hunter. Obviously, there's a lot of unresolved tension between them, and it's all going to bubble over, and I'm sure him and Hunter are going to get in some sort of fist fight in the next episode. And it'll be interesting to see because it's probably going to be Omega who has to separate them, and of course she's going to be the link that can bring all these brothers back after their many, many battles. Something I saw on social media which really rings true is that it's possible that Hunter and Wrecker and Echo sort of subconsciously hold Crosshair responsible for Tech's death. Tech's death was caused by them going to a summit, an Imperial summit on Iriadu, and they were looking for information on where Crosshair was because they knew he'd turned on the Empire and Omega, and Wrecker at least were very convinced Hunter that they needed to go looking for their brother if he could be rescued. And so if they hadn't have done that, then maybe Tech wouldn't have died. And I think it'll be interesting to see if they think that or say that in the next episode. As always, I'm very excited for the next episode of The Bad Batch. That's about it for this recap/review, and I will see you next time on Battle Station Radio. Until then, may the Force be with you, always.